I still remember that day like it was yesterday. The sky was gray, and a cold wind swept through the narrow streets as I walked toward my daughter-in-law's home. My heart was pounding, not from the chill in the air, but from the thought of what was waiting for me inside. I had decided to act like a poor, helpless mother, simple, naive, someone they could underestimate completely. Deep down, I knew they had secrets I had no idea about, but I also had a secret of my own. When I reached the gate, I paused, pretending to struggle with the heavy latch. My hands shook slightly, not from the cold, I told myself, but to make it believable. I had to look weak, unimportant, someone they would dismiss. As soon as the door opened, I smiled timidly and bowed my head. "Hello," I said softly. My daughter-in-law's mother looked at me from the doorway with a faint, polite smile that didn't reach her eyes. Her husband, a tall man with a sharp gaze, barely acknowledged me. It was clear they had judged me within seconds. The house smelled faintly of spices and fresh bread. I could hear the distant laughter of children playing in the yard next door. Everything seemed normal on the surface, yet I felt an invisible tension hanging in the air, like a storm ready to break. I was offered a seat in the living room, an old couch that squeaked under my weight. I kept my hands folded in my lap and lowered my eyes. My son was away on a business trip, and I wanted them to see me as harmless, someone they could easily underestimate. I noticed small details as I sat there, photos on the wall showing their family smiling in expensive clothes, a shiny car parked outside, a set of delicate teacups arranged neatly on the table. Everything screamed wealth and pride, and yet I felt a strange unease. There was a shadow of something unspoken, something hidden behind polite words and forced smiles. I tried to appear weak, tired, even a little foolish, answering simple questions about my life without revealing anything significant. As we sipped tea, I caught a whisper between my daughter-in-law and her mother. They laughed softly, and I pretended not to hear. But the words "you'll see and she doesn't know" stuck in my mind. I felt a shiver run down my spine. What did they mean? Were they talking about me, or something else? I tried to focus on my own act, smiling, nodding, keeping my tone light, but inside, my mind was racing. There was a secret in that house, something I wasn't supposed to know yet, and I had to find out. Hours passed slowly. Every sound, the clinking of cups, the soft hum of a fan, the distant barking of a dog, made my nerves tighten. I felt trapped in a game I had barely started to understand. I wanted to ask questions, to confront them, but I had to stay calm. My act had to be perfect, any slip could ruin everything. I could sense their curiosity as well. Their eyes would linger on me for just a second too long, and I knew they were testing me, trying to figure out how much I knew. Then, as the evening approached, something strange happened. A drawer in the corner of the room, slightly ajar, caught my eye. I noticed a thick envelope, partially hidden, with my son's name written on it in neat handwriting. My heart skipped a beat. Could it be a letter meant for me, or something they wanted to hide from me? I had no excuse to reach for it, but my curiosity burned like fire. I glanced around, everyone was busy talking, completely unaware that I had noticed. My hand itched to grab it, but I forced myself to stay seated, pretending to adjust my scarf. Just then, a sudden noise startled me, a chair scraping loudly against the floor, followed by a sharp, almost angry whisper. I looked up, and their eyes were on me. For a moment, I froze, unsure if they had noticed my glance. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought they could hear it. They exchanged quick, meaningful looks, and I realized something terrible. Whatever was in that envelope, it could change everything. I had stepped into a world where everyone had a role, and I was pretending to be a fool, but someone clearly suspected I was more than I seemed. I still remember the way my hands trembled as I sipped the last drop of tea. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, to get out of that house before it was too late. Yet I couldn't. Something told me I had to stay, to uncover the truth, to see what would happen next. And then, just as I was about to stand, my daughter-in-law leaned closer and whispered, "You have no idea what you've walked into." I froze. My stomach dropped. The room suddenly felt colder, darker, and heavier. That whisper, so soft yet so full of meaning, was like a warning. I wanted to ask her what she meant, but my voice wouldn't come. I realized then that this visit, this simple act of pretending, was about to become something far more dangerous and revealing than I had ever imagined. And deep down, I knew that by the end of the night, nothing would ever be the same again. I still remember that night, the air heavy with tension, as I sat frozen in their living room. The words my daughter-in-law whispered kept echoing in my mind, "You have no idea what you've walked into." My hands gripped the edge of the couch so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Every sound in the room, the ticking of the old clock, the faint hum of the refrigerator, the distant murmur of neighbors, felt louder than usual. My heart was pounding as if it wanted to break free from my chest. I realized that pretending to be naive was no longer enough. I needed to be careful with every word, every movement, every breath. After a moment, she straightened up, her face calm, but there was a sharpness in her eyes that made me uneasy. I tried to smile politely, but it probably came off as nervous. She poured herself a cup of tea, glancing at me briefly, and then turned to speak to her mother. Their conversation was low, almost inaudible, but I could catch fragments of words, "Don't let her see," and "Tomorrow everything changes." My stomach churned. Whatever was about to happen, it involved me. I couldn't figure out why, but a sinking feeling told me that it was bigger than just a misunderstanding. I sat there, trying to appear calm, as they continued talking. The room was warm, lit softly by a lamp in the corner, but the atmosphere felt tense, suffocating even. I kept my hands in my lap, pretending to be tired from travel, pretending to be weak, just as I had planned. My act had always been my shield, but now I wondered if it was enough. I noticed the envelope on the side table again. My curiosity wanted to pull me toward it, but caution kept me seated. I couldn't risk showing my interest yet. Suddenly, a small sound behind me made me jump. The old wooden floorboard creaked, and I turned to see their young son peeking from the doorway. His eyes were wide, curious, but there was a strange seriousness in them, unusual for a child. "Grandma, who is she really?" he asked in a whisper, almost like a warning. My breath caught in my throat. The child had seen through me, or at least suspected something I wasn't ready to reveal. I managed to smile faintly and said softly, "I'm just a tired traveler, dear." But inside, I knew that the walls of this house were thinner than I thought, and secrets had a way of leaking even through small eyes. The evening stretched on. Dinner was served, and the table was set elegantly, but I barely touched the food. Every bite felt tasteless as I observed the family. My daughter-in-law spoke politely, asking about my health and my travels, but I could sense a hidden edge to her words, a careful measuring of my reactions. Her parents, too, watched me like hawks, exchanging subtle glances. It was clear, they were testing me, probing me for weaknesses or signs that I was hiding something. The tension was almost unbearable, like walking on thin ice. Then came a moment I could never have anticipated. My daughter-in-law's mother excused herself to the kitchen, leaving a brief silence. I leaned slightly toward her father, the man with the sharp gaze, and asked in a quiet voice, "Is there something I should know?" He stared at me for a long moment, and I felt as if he could see right through my act. Finally, he spoke, his voice low, almost a growl, "Some things are not meant for you yet. But you'll find out soon enough." His words sent a chill down my spine. There was more going on than I had imagined, much more. After dinner, I was shown to a guest room. It was a small, neatly kept room with a window overlooking the back garden. The moonlight spilled softly across the floor, casting shadows that seemed to move on their own. I still remember lying on that bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling a strange mixture of fear and excitement. I couldn't stop thinking about the envelope, about the whispered warnings, about the strange seriousness in their son's eyes. Something was waiting for me, something that could change my life completely. As I lay there, a soft knock came at the door. My heart leapt into my throat. Who could it be at this hour? The knock came again, quieter this time, almost hesitant. I got up and opened the door slowly. Standing there was my daughter-in-law. Her eyes were wide, almost desperate. She whispered, "You need to see this, but you must promise me you won't tell anyone yet." I nodded, unable to speak. She held out the envelope I had seen earlier. "It's your son's, but it's not what you think." I took the envelope, my hands trembling. The weight of it felt heavier than paper should. As I held it close, 1,000 questions raced through my mind. What was inside? Why had they hidden it? Why was my daughter-in-law showing it to me now? She stepped back, glancing nervously toward the hallway, and whispered, "Open it, but be ready for the truth." And in that moment, I realized that my simple act of pretending had led me straight into the heart of a secret so deep, so carefully guarded, that uncovering it could change everything. I still remember the cold, heavy silence of that room, the way my fingers fumbled with the envelope, and the sudden, overwhelming sense that once I opened it, nothing would ever be the same again. I still remember that night as I sat on the edge of the small bed, the envelope trembling in my hands. My heart raced so fast that it felt like it would burst from my chest. I wanted to open it, to know the truth, but at the same time, a voice inside me warned that some truths could hurt more than lies. My daughter-in-law watched me closely, her eyes full of urgency and fear. "You have to see this," she whispered again, her voice barely audible. I nodded, swallowing hard, feeling a strange mix of fear and anticipation. I opened the envelope slowly, carefully, as if every second could change the outcome. Inside was a letter, neatly written in my son's handwriting. My hands shook as I unfolded the paper. The moment I read the first line, I froze. It said, "Mother, I never told you about her, because I was afraid of what it would do to you." My chest tightened. Who was he talking about? What had he hidden from me all these years? My eyes scanned the lines, each word heavier than the last. The letter revealed something I had never imagined. My son spoke of a daughter, a child he had kept secret from everyone, his family, his wife, and me. My mind reeled. I couldn't breathe. My son had a daughter I didn't know about? The thought of her, tiny and innocent, hidden away from the world, made my heart ache. I felt both anger and sadness swirl inside me. How could he hide something so important? And why had no one else told me? My daughter-in-law's hand rested lightly on my shoulder. "I didn't know either," she said softly. "But I think it's why they've been acting strangely. Your son, he wanted to protect you, but now you need to meet her." My hands trembled as I clutched the letter. I could feel a mix of emotions crashing over me, shock, fear, and a deep, aching curiosity. I needed to see this child. I needed to understand why my son had kept such a huge secret. I followed my daughter-in-law quietly down the hall. The house was dark now, except for the soft glow of the nightlight in the hallway. Every step echoed on the wooden floor, and I felt like the walls themselves were listening, watching, waiting. I still remember the sound of the floor creaking beneath my feet, each step heavier than the last. I felt like I was walking into a world I wasn't prepared for, a place where every secret could change my life forever. We reached a small door at the end of the hall. My daughter-in-law paused and turned to me. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. I nodded, unable to speak. My throat was dry, and my hands were clammy. I had imagined this moment 1,000 times in my head, but nothing had prepared me for the reality of it. She opened the door slowly, and the softest sound of a lullaby drifted from inside. My heart leapt. Someone was there, someone I had never met, yet someone so connected to me, someone I had been waiting for without even knowing it. Inside the room, a little girl slept in a crib, her chest rising and falling gently. She had dark hair and tiny hands curled against her face. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, unable to speak. My daughter-in-law whispered, "She's your granddaughter, your son's secret." My legs felt weak, and I had to sit down on a chair nearby. I couldn't move. I wanted to reach out, to touch her, to hold her, but I didn't want to wake her. She looked so peaceful, so innocent, and yet the knowledge that she had been hidden from me for all these years made my heart ache. I still remember the weight of that moment, the quiet breathing of the child, the tense silence of the house, and the strange mix of joy and pain I felt. I wanted to ask a million questions, but my daughter-in-law placed a finger on her lips, signaling me to wait. "She doesn't know you yet," she whispered. "You have to be careful. Things are complicated." I nodded, though I didn't fully understand. How could something so innocent be the center of such secrecy? Just as I was about to leave the room, I noticed a small notebook lying on a side table. It was old and worn, and the pages looked filled with tiny writing. I picked it up carefully and flipped it open. My heart skipped a beat as I recognized my son's handwriting again. The notebook was filled with stories about this little girl, her first steps, her first words, her laughter, and her fears. Every word he had written was full of love, full of longing, full of guilt for keeping her hidden. And then, on the very last page, there was a note that made my blood run cold. "One day, she will know the truth. But only when the time is right. Until then, protect her from everything, even her own grandmother." I dropped the notebook instantly. My hands were shaking. Protect her from me? What did that mean? Was my son afraid of me? Or was there something else I didn't know? My daughter-in-law's eyes met mine, and I could see fear there too. "There's more," she said softly, her voice barely a whisper. I still remember standing there, frozen, my mind spinning. The room was silent except for the soft breathing of the child. And I realized, in that moment, that nothing in my life had prepared me for the truth I had just discovered. This little girl was innocent, yet she was the key to a secret so deep that uncovering it could change everything: my son, my daughter-in-law, their family, and even my own life. And then, just as I was about to ask what she meant by "there's more," I heard a door slam shut from somewhere deep in the house. It wasn't a normal slam, it was sharp, deliberate, almost a warning. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. Someone else was in the house, and whatever was coming next, I had a feeling it would not be kind. I still remember that night, the sound of the slammed door echoing through the house like a warning bell. My heart pounded in my chest, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. I didn't know who had slammed it, or why, but instinct told me that the secret I had just uncovered was only part of something far larger. My daughter-in-law stepped closer, placing a hand on my arm, whispering, "We need to be careful. You weren't supposed to see all of this tonight." Her eyes darted nervously toward the hallway, and I realized then that I was in a place filled with shadows, shadows of secrets, of lies, of things long hidden. I set the envelope and notebook on the bedside table, but my hands continued to shake. I could barely breathe. That little girl, sleeping so peacefully in the crib, was unaware of the storm that had just begun. I wanted to pick her up, hold her, comfort her, but I hesitated. My daughter-in-law shook her head slightly, her lips pressed together. "Not yet," she whispered. "Everything has to happen in the right order. Trust me." Her words made me uneasy. Why did timing matter so much? What danger could there be for a child so innocent? We moved quietly down the hallway toward the living room, every creak of the floorboard making me jump. The house was unusually quiet now, almost too quiet, as if it were holding its breath. I still remember the smell of the room, the faint aroma of old wood, mixed with the lingering scent of tea and baked bread. It should have been comforting, but instead, it made me tense. Every sound seemed louder than it should have been. My ears were alert for even the smallest whisper, every shadow in the corners of my vision making me anxious. My daughter-in-law led me to a side room I had never entered before. It was dimly lit, the curtains drawn tightly. Inside, I saw her parents talking in low, serious voices, their faces grim. The moment they saw me, they froze. My daughter-in-law quickly whispered, "I'll explain, but you must promise to stay calm." I nodded, though my heart was hammering in my chest. There was something in their eyes, a fear, a worry, a tension, that I hadn't noticed before. And in that instant, I realized that the envelope, the hidden child, and my son's secrets were just pieces of a much larger puzzle. Her father finally spoke, his voice low, almost harsh. "Your son, he has made choices that he didn't tell us about. Choices that affect everyone in this house. You need to understand that it wasn't just about hiding the child, it was about protection and betrayal. I stared at him, confused and trembling. My mind raced. Betrayal? Protection? What had my son done that required so much secrecy, so much fear? I had always thought of him as careful, thoughtful, loving. And yet, here he was, hiding a child, writing secret notebooks, keeping everyone at a distance. Suddenly, a loud thump echoed from upstairs, startling all of us. My daughter-in-law jumped slightly and muttered under her breath, "I knew it, they're awake now." My pulse quickened. Who was awake? And what had they discovered? The tension in the room grew so thick it felt almost suffocating. I felt trapped, like a small bird caught in a cage, unable to move, unable to escape. The secrets in this house were suffocating, and I was right in the middle of them. Her mother spoke next, her voice trembling slightly. "You need to know something, there's more than just the child. Your son, he made promises to people outside this family, promises that could destroy lives if revealed. And now, some of them have returned." My heart froze. I didn't understand everything she meant, but the words "destroy lives" echoed in my mind. What kind of promises could endanger people? Why hadn't my son told me? The weight of the moment pressed down on me like a stone. As I stood there, trying to make sense of it all, I realized that the house itself seemed alive. The shadows seemed darker, the corners sharper, as if the walls were closing in. Every noise, the faint tick of the clock, the distant rustle of leaves outside, made me jump. I still remember the way my hands shook as I gripped the edge of the table for support. I had walked into this house thinking I could pretend, thinking I could hide behind a mask of weakness. But now, I understood that this was no longer an act. My life, my family, and even my innocence were at stake. Then, from the hallway, a soft, deliberate knock came at the door. It wasn't the usual hesitant tap, it was controlled, slow, almost deliberate, as if the person outside knew exactly what they were doing. My daughter-in-law froze, her eyes widening in terror. "They know we're here," she whispered. "And they're coming for answers." My stomach dropped. Who was coming? And what answers could they want from me? I felt a cold sweat forming on my forehead, my body tense, ready to flee, but there was nowhere to go. I still remember the silence that followed, the way the house seemed to hold its breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. My heart raced, my mind spinning with questions I couldn't answer. I wanted to run, to leave, but I knew that whatever was coming would not allow it. And in that moment, I realized that my simple act of pretending to be weak and naive had brought me to the edge of a secret so dangerous, so carefully hidden, that escaping it would be impossible. The door handle turned slowly. I froze, my entire body trembling. The next moment, the door creaked open, and a shadow appeared in the doorway. I still remember that night, the air thick with fear as the shadow in the doorway slowly stepped into the room. My heart felt like it had stopped beating. I couldn't see clearly at first, only a silhouette outlined by the faint light from the hall. Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I was frozen, rooted to the spot. My daughter-in-law grabbed my arm tightly, her nails digging into my skin. Her eyes were wide, full of warning and fear. "Stay calm," she whispered. "Do exactly as I say." The figure moved closer, and finally, I could make out a familiar face, someone I had never expected to see in this house. It was a man, tall, with a sharp expression that made my stomach twist into knots. He looked at me directly, and in that instant, I realized that he knew far more about me than I had ever wanted anyone to know. His eyes held a mix of suspicion, anger, and something darker, something that made my blood run cold. I wanted to speak, to explain, but my throat was dry, my words stuck somewhere deep inside. "My name is not important," he said finally, his voice low and controlled. "But what is important is that you do not open this house to anyone else until the truth comes out." My mind reeled. Who was he? Why had he come here? And what truth was he talking about? My daughter-in-law stepped slightly forward, positioning herself between me and the man. "You can't just barge in here," she said, her voice shaking slightly. But he didn't flinch. His gaze remained fixed on me, and I felt like he could see every thought, every secret hidden in my heart. I still remember the chill running through me as he continued. "Your son's decisions, they have consequences. You've seen part of it, but there's much more. The child, she is at the center of something bigger, something dangerous. If the wrong people find out about her, no one will be safe." My breath caught. Dangerous? Who could threaten a child? The thought of harm coming to that innocent little girl made me feel both rage and helplessness. I wanted to protect her with every fiber of my being, but I also realized that this was no ordinary danger. The man glanced toward my daughter-in-law and her parents, his expression hardening. This family has been trying to shield her from the truth, but the truth will find a way to surface. You need to understand the risks before it's too late. I felt my hands tremble, the envelope and notebook from earlier suddenly heavy in my lap. My son had hidden a secret, yes, but now I understood that what he had hidden was only the beginning. There were layers upon layers, and the deeper I went, the more I realized that I had walked straight into a storm I could not escape. My daughter-in-law whispered urgently to me, "We can't trust anyone right now. Not even those closest to you. You must stay strong, stay calm, and act like you know nothing. If you show fear, it could trigger things we can't control." I nodded, though my mind was spinning. Who could I trust? Everyone in this house seemed to know something I didn't, and the more I learned, the more I felt like a pawn in a game that had been played long before I arrived. Suddenly, a soft sound from upstairs made us all pause, a creak, followed by a faint thump. The man's eyes narrowed, and I could see tension ripple through his body. "They're awake," he said, almost to himself. My blood ran cold. I hadn't realized how late it had become, but the child, she was still asleep. Who was awake? And what did he mean by they? The unknown threat made every hair on my body stand on end. The man took a step closer to me, his shadow falling over my face. "You must understand," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "that your son's choices were not simple mistakes. They involved people who are dangerous, people who will stop at nothing. You are now part of this, whether you like it or not." My heart skipped a beat. Part of this? Me? How could a mother, pretending to be helpless, suddenly be drawn into something so frightening? I felt trapped, cornered, yet determined. I would not allow harm to come to the child, no matter what. I still remember the tension that hung in the room, the way the walls seemed to close in, the faint sound of my own breathing echoing in my ears. Every instinct told me that the next moments would change everything. And then, just as I was about to ask him what we should do next, a sudden crash came from the kitchen, loud, sharp, like someone had thrown a heavy object. We all froze. The man's eyes flicked toward the noise, his body rigid. My daughter-in-law's grip on my arm tightened. I felt my stomach churn. Something had just entered the house, someone we hadn't expected, someone who had been hiding until now. The tension was unbearable. I still remember the way my heart pounded, the fear and adrenaline mixing into a dizzying storm. And then, in the shadows of the kitchen doorway, I saw a figure emerge, a figure that made my blood run cold, and my mind screamed silently, this was no ordinary visitor. Whoever this was, they had come with a purpose. And I realized, with a sickening certainty, that nothing would ever be the same again. I still remember that night, the chilling sound of the intruder's footsteps echoing through the house. My heart felt like it was pounding in my throat. I couldn't see the person clearly yet, all I could make out was a dark silhouette moving deliberately through the hallway. My daughter-in-law pulled me closer, whispering urgently, "Stay behind me. Don't make a sound." I nodded, though my hands were shaking uncontrollably. Every instinct told me to run, but I knew it was too late for that. Whoever this was, they had come with a purpose, and it was not to ask politely. The man in the shadows stopped just long enough for me to see his face. I froze. It was someone I had vaguely heard about, someone connected to my son's past, someone I had never met but whose presence sent shivers down my spine. His eyes were sharp, calculating, and filled with anger. The moment he saw me, I could feel the intensity of his gaze piercing through my every thought. I still remember how the room suddenly felt colder, as if the air itself had been sucked out, leaving only fear behind. He spoke, his voice low and menacing. "So, this is where she is." My daughter-in-law's grip on my arm tightened. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice trembling but firm. The intruder smiled faintly, a cruel, knowing smile. "I'm someone who knows the truth," he said. "Your son's secrets, they belong to me now." My stomach dropped. Belong to him? How could one person claim control over something so personal, something so precious? I wanted to step forward, to protect the child, but my daughter-in-law held me back. I still remember the sound of the child stirring upstairs. Her soft whimpers, barely audible, made my heart ache. I wanted to run to her, to cradle her in my arms, but I couldn't. The man's attention was focused entirely on us, and I knew that one wrong move could trigger something terrible. My daughter-in-law whispered urgently in my ear, "Don't show fear." "Not yet. We have to be smart." I nodded, my mind racing, trying to figure out a plan. How could we face someone so dangerous, someone so determined? The intruder stepped closer, his eyes narrowing. "Your son thought he could hide her from me. He thought he could protect her. But he underestimated the reach of those he crossed," he said. I felt a cold wave of dread. My son, had he really made enemies so dangerous that they would come to threaten his family? The thought of harm coming to that innocent child filled me with a mixture of anger and desperation. I wanted to fight, to push him away, but my daughter-in-law's hand on my arm reminded me to stay calm, to play the part of the naive, helpless mother. He glanced around the room, his gaze falling on the envelope and notebook from earlier. I realized he must know about them. My heart raced. If he read them, everything would be revealed, our secrets, our plans, everything my son had tried to protect. I still remember how my hands shook as I subtly moved to cover them with a cushion on the chair. The intruder's eyes flicked toward the corner where I had hidden the papers, and I could feel the tension rise like a heavy weight pressing down on my chest. Suddenly, another sound startled us, a soft whisper from the hallway, low but urgent. My daughter-in-law's father stepped into the doorway, his expression grim. "Stop right there," he said firmly. The intruder paused, his eyes flicking toward him. For a moment, the room felt frozen in time, every heartbeat amplified, every breath sharp in the silence. I still remember the way my chest tightened, how every muscle in my body screamed at me to run, but I couldn't move. The intruder's gaze hardened. "You think you can protect her?" he said, his voice like ice. "You have no idea what's coming. The secrets your family keeps are worth more than you know, and I intend to claim them all." I felt my knees weaken. My daughter-in-law gripped my arm tighter, whispering urgently, "We have to act fast. If he gets closer to the child, it will be too late." My mind raced. I needed to protect her, to stop him, but I had no weapons, no allies nearby, and very little time. The fear inside me was like fire, but beneath it, a small spark of determination grew. And then, just as the intruder took another step forward, a loud crash came from the stairway, the child's room. I froze, my heart nearly stopping. The little girl had awakened fully, and her cries filled the house. The intruder's eyes flicked toward the noise, his anger turning into rage. My daughter-in-law looked at me, her face pale, whispering, "This is it, whatever happens next will change everything." I still remember the sound of her cries echoing in my ears, the heavy silence after the intruder's scream, and the sudden, overwhelming realization that we were about to face a confrontation that none of us could predict. The room seemed to shrink, the shadows closer, the danger pressing in from every side. I had come to this house pretending to be helpless, pretending to be naive, but now, in the face of real danger, I knew that pretending would not be enough to save the child, or myself. And then, in the darkness, the intruder moved toward the stairway, his steps deliberate and fast, and I realized that the next few moments would determine everything, whether we survived, whether the child remained safe, and whether the truth my son had hidden for so long would finally come to light. I still remember that night, the sound of the intruder's heavy steps moving toward the stairway. My heart was racing so fast that it felt like it could explode, and the little girl's cries pierced through the house, making every nerve in my body scream. I wanted to run to her, to shield her from the danger, but my daughter-in-law's hand on my arm kept me frozen. "Not yet," she whispered urgently. "We have to be smart. Any sudden move could make it worse." I nodded, even though every instinct inside me screamed to act. The intruder's shadow loomed larger with every step, his face twisted with anger and determination. I could see the sharp glint in his eyes, the way his muscles tensed as he prepared to reach the stairway. My chest felt tight, my breathing shallow. I had come to this house pretending to be weak, pretending to be naive, but now, the act no longer mattered. I had to protect the child. I had to be ready for whatever would come. My daughter-in-law's father stepped forward, placing himself between the intruder and the stairs. "Stop," he commanded, his voice loud and firm. The intruder hesitated for a moment, his jaw tightening. "You think you can stop me?" he growled. "You have no idea what's at stake." I still remember the tension in the air, thick enough to touch, the fear in the room pressing down on me like a weight. Every heartbeat felt amplified, every second stretching longer than it should. Then, as if on cue, the little girl's cries grew louder, desperate and heart-wrenching. I felt a rush of fear and anger so strong that I could barely think. My hands shook, my legs felt weak, but my mind was clear. I could not let her be harmed. I stepped slightly forward, pretending to shuffle as if I were weak and unsure, but inside, I was preparing to act. My eyes never left the intruder, and I prayed that my son's child would remain safe. The intruder's gaze flicked toward me for a brief moment, and I realized with sudden clarity that he had underestimated me. He thought I was only a simple, helpless mother, someone easy to dismiss. But I was far from helpless. I had learned more than he knew, observed more than he expected, and I had a fire inside me that he could not see. My daughter-in-law noticed my glance and gave a slight nod, a silent signal. She trusted me to help. I still remember the next moments like a blur. The intruder took another step toward the stairway, but her father lunged, grabbing his arm and twisting him backward. The man let out a sharp cry of anger, stumbling slightly. My daughter-in-law and I moved quickly, placing ourselves between him and the stairway. I reached for the child's room door and flung it open. The little girl looked up, her eyes wide with fear, and I scooped her up, holding her tightly to my chest. Her warmth against me made me more determined than ever. She was safe, for now, but the danger was far from over. The intruder recovered quickly, his eyes burning with fury. "Give me the child," he shouted. I clutched her closer, holding her against my chest as if my life depended on it, which, in that moment, it did. My voice trembled as I spoke, though I tried to make it firm. "You will not touch her. She is innocent. She is not part of your war." My daughter-in-law's father stepped forward again, standing close behind me, his expression grim. The intruder laughed bitterly, a cold, cruel sound. "You think you can stop me? This child is part of a secret much bigger than you. You have no idea what your family has done." I still remember the fear that gripped me, but beneath it, a determination stronger than ever. I was no longer just pretending to be naive. Every second, every breath, every heartbeat was focused on protecting this child, on keeping her safe from a danger that had been hidden from me for years. I could feel my hands tightening around her small body, my mind racing, trying to find a way to outsmart him, to keep her away from harm. Then, just as the tension reached its peak, the intruder made a sudden move, lunging toward us with speed I hadn't anticipated. I screamed, my voice filled with terror, but at the same time, I acted instinctively, stepping in front of the child. My daughter-in-law's father grabbed him again, but this time, the intruder's strength was frightening. I felt the room tilt, the walls pressing in, the danger almost too close to bear. And then, just as I thought all hope was lost, a loud crash from the back door startled us all. Someone else had entered the house, a third person. I still remember the shock that hit me like ice. Who could it be? Friend or foe? And what side would they take in the chaos that was unfolding? The intruder froze, his eyes flicking toward the new figure. In that moment, I realized that the house was no longer a place of secrets and whispers, it had become a battlefield. And in that battlefield, the safety of my son's child depended on every choice I made in the next few seconds. I still remember that night, the way the house seemed to hold its breath as the new figure stepped through the back door. The intruder froze, his eyes narrowing, and for a brief moment, I felt hope. Maybe help had arrived, someone who could turn the tide and keep the child safe. I held her tightly against my chest, feeling the steady warmth of her tiny body and the rhythm of her heartbeat. Every nerve in my body was alert, every thought focused on keeping her out of harm's way. The newcomer revealed himself as one of my son's closest friends, a man I had trusted before, loyal and calm. "Step back," he commanded firmly, his voice echoing through the tense room. The intruder hesitated, unsure how to react, and in that moment, we gained the advantage. My daughter-in-law and her father guided me and the child to a safe corner, while the friend confronted the intruder, forcing him toward the front door. I still remember the sound of the intruder's footsteps retreating, the slam of the door behind him, and the sudden, almost unreal calm that fell over the house. I sank into a chair, my body trembling, the child still in my arms. My daughter-in-law sat beside me, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. "It's over, for now," she whispered. But I knew the truth, secrets like these never truly end. I had uncovered part of a hidden world, a world of choices, dangers, and truths that my son had tried to protect me from. And yet, despite the fear and chaos, I felt a deep sense of relief. The child was safe, and I had done more than pretend, I had acted, and my heart had guided me when fear threatened to take over. We all sat in silence for a few moments, the quiet punctuated only by the soft breathing of the little girl in my arms. I still remember how fragile and precious she seemed, how small and innocent, yet at the center of a secret storm. My thoughts wandered to my son, the choices he had made, and the love that must have guided him to protect her. I realized then that pretending to be weak had not made me powerless, it had allowed me to see the truth without alarming anyone, to understand the delicate balance of secrecy and safety in this house. Later, my daughter-in-law and I returned the child to her room, tucking her in gently. I whispered a quiet promise to her, a vow to always protect her, even if it meant facing danger and fear again. I still remember the soft rise and fall of her chest as she slept peacefully, the innocence in her face, and the deep emotional bond one felt forming instantly. She was not just my son's secret, she was part of me now, and I would not let anything harm her. In the following days, the house slowly returned to its usual rhythm, but the tension remained beneath the surface. My son eventually returned, unaware of the full events, and I kept my act of simplicity, but now with a deeper understanding. I had walked into a house pretending to be naive, but I had discovered courage I didn't know I possessed. I had learned that love and protection are stronger than fear and secrecy, and that even in the darkest moments, you can find the strength to face what seems impossible. I still remember the final quiet night, sitting in the living room, the little girl asleep upstairs, and the house finally calm. My thoughts reflected on everything that had happened, the secrets, the danger, the whispered warnings, and the courage we had all found within ourselves. I realized that life is full of surprises, some terrifying, some beautiful, but every challenge teaches you who you really are. I had come pretending to be helpless, but in the end, I had been anything but. And as I sat there, reflecting on the night that changed everything, I turned to the camera of my mind, to the audience listening to my story, and I said softly, "Sometimes life forces you to pretend, to hide, to be something you are not, but when the time comes, courage comes from the heart, and love guides every step. Protect those you care for, never underestimate your own strength, and always be ready for the unexpected." If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. Remember, every secret has a story, and every story has the power to change lives, sometimes in ways you could never imagine.